Welcome to this course on strategic management. I am Professor Srinivasan. I teach in the Department of Management Studies at the Indian Institute of Science. I plan to cover this subject in about 40 to 42 sessions. The topics that will be covered in this course, the topics are divided into different modules. In the first module, we look at an introduction to strategic management. I intend to cover this introduction to strategic management in about 5 sessions. Each session approximately taking about 1.5 hours. The main references for this subject are the 2 books which are written by me and published by Prentice Hall of India. The first book is on strategic management, the 3rd edition, published by Prentice Hall of India. This has come out in the year 2009. This has come out in the year 2009 and this is easily available to you in all the leading bookstalls in the country. The second book which I will be referring and which you can also refer is the book on the case studies in marketing, the Indian context, again published by Prentice Hall of India. I will be referring to the 4th edition of this book, published in 2008. Okay. If you see, there are 7 modules in which I will be covering this subject. And each session, as I mentioned, is approximately 1.5 hours. So, I plan to cover this subject in about 27 to 28 sessions. With this, we start with the first module. The first module is where I introduce you to this topic on strategic management. You may just wonder, what is this strategic management all about? When did it really come into being? If you really see, this strategic management in the informal sense is not very new. It was in fact very much there right from the Mahabharata days. So, when did we get this first terminology of strategy being used? So, if you go back, it was about more than 5000 years back, that is 5000 BC, when this whole story epic of the Mahabharata is supposed to have taken place in this country. So, what happened in this war? So, if this war had 2 sides, one is the side of the Kauravas, the other is the side of the Pandavas. The side of the Kauravas, it had 11 Akshohini Sainyas, and the side of the Pandavas had 7 Akshohini Sainyas. Many of you might be just wondering, what does an Akshohini mean? So, just let me for this sake just bring you up to, let me write a few things about this Akshohini. What does one Akshohini mean? If you really see, one Akshohini just means that there were 21,870 chariots, 21,870 horses, then 65,610, okay, a small correction, 21,870 elephants, 65,610 horses, then 1,09,350 foot soldiers. This is the composition of one Akshohini. Kauravas had 11 such Akshohinis, 11 such Akshohinis, and Pandavas had 7 of them. So, you may just get an idea of what is the difference in the soldiers between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. If you really see, make an approximate guess about it, you can see that the Kauravas had really got about 5 lakh more soldiers than the Pandavas, which is a huge number. Now, in spite of this huge number, what was happening is the Kauravas were getting really beaten in the war by the Pandavas in spite of their numerical strength and in spite of having so many Atirathas and Maharathas. Now, the king of the Kauravas, that is Duryodhana, comes to Drona, who is the Senadipati of the Kaurava army, and explains this problem to him, saying that, look, we are numerically nearly 5 lakhs more than the Pandavas. We started with 5 lakhs more than the Pandavas, but now I find that most of my army is getting decimated by the Pandavas, and you are the Acharya for both the Pandavas and the Kauravas. All of us have learnt our Vidya from you. How is it that in spite of you being the Acharya, the Pandavas are only winning and we are not able to win? At which point of time Drona tells Duryodhana, look Duryodhana, we warned you against going to this war, that is I, Bhishma and others, but you were guided by your trusted friends like Karna, Shakuni, Dushyasana. Now that the war has started and now we are at this point of time, let me, for your comfort sake, formulate this Kaurava army in a strategic formulation tomorrow. This strategic formulation the Pandavas cannot penetrate except Arjuna. So, if you can take Arjuna away from the main battlefield, I will ensure that one of the Atirathas from the Pandava side is killed tomorrow. This is a mention of, this is how Drona mentions to the Duryodhana. So, So, the first time the term strategy is formally used by Drona in the Mahabharat war. So, what was the formulation which was used? The formulation that was used was the Chakravyuha. The Pandavas, the Kaurava army was formulated in this Chakravyuha, in this form of chakras, and in this Chakravyuha, the person who pierced this Chakravyuha was Abhimanyu. He could not come out of this Chakravyuha, he got killed in the war. So, in other words, this term strategy or the strategy formulation is not something new as far as the Indians are concerned, as far as the way the thinking of the Indians have been concerned. But formally the term strategy was used as late as 1965 by this gentleman Ansoff when he was working for this company Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. So, the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, it was the one which wanted him to work on a particular project where he said, okay, I will formulate a strategy to approach this problem. So, formally the term strategy was used by Ansoff in 1965. Now, from that time onwards strategy is in use, but for the first time in our country the term strategy was not used, but what was used was corporate planning. The first Indian industry to start corporate planning was the public sector Bharat Heavy Electricals in the year 1974. From that time onwards, corporate planning has given or has undergone transformation to strategy. How it has undergone transformation to strategy? We will look at that in a short time from now. With this, we will come to what do you understand by the term strategy. When we look at strategy, what we can just say is, if you just go back. So, we can look at a formal definition of strategy, or we can look at a formal definition of strategic planning in this following manner. So, what is this term strategy? This term strategy refers to long term decisions. They include objectives, goals and courses of action for an organization. As I mentioned to you, the term strategy was formally used by this gentleman Ansoff in the year 1965. When it came into India in 1974, the terminology that was adopted was corporate planning. It underwent change to strategy. What was the defining parameter to go from corporate planning to strategy? This is the question which you might like to know. So, when a company like BHEL wanted to do corporate planning for its different divisions and encompassing the company as a whole, what it wanted to do was have a vision document or a planning document for the next 5 years. That is, what does BHEL want to do in the next 5 years. So, for the first time in the country, you had a public sector unit like Bharat Heavy Electricals coming up with a plan of action for the next 5 years, saying this is what we want to do. Now, this was all right initially when the public sectors were holding sway. What happened in the mid 80s? Mid 80s in the country saw competition being introduced. So, the first sector to face this competition was the sector of telecom. So, the first public sector unit to be open to competition was the first public sector unit to be started in India, that is the Indian Telephone Industries in telecom. So, ITI was thrown open to competition. That is, what do you mean by saying ITI was thrown open to competition? Some of the products which ITI was manufacturing were allowed to be manufactured by private sector players. The result was, from 1984 onwards, the telecom industry underwent a sea change. You had a number of players coming into the telecom industry, manufacturing products which were earlier considered the monopoly of ITI. Okay. Now, what did this influx or what did this entry of private players into the public domain make? What is the difference? What is the difference did it make? The difference it made was the companies started looking at shorter time horizons. Instead of looking at 5 years, they said, why not we look at a shorter time horizon. So, this is what competition can do in the marketplace. Now came the liberalization in 1991. You had the IT revolution, you had the electronic revolution, and this IT revolution and the electronic revolution together, what did they do? What they did was something absolutely dramatic. You had product life shrinking, you had number of products put into the market by different companies in terms of different models and variants of products, all those types of things. When so many things were happening, companies were forced to look at their planning horizons in more and more detail, that is at a shorter planning horizon. So, the term corporate planning, as soon as this liberalization process started gaining momentum, started rechristening itself, and it became strategic management. Now, organizations look at a time horizon of 3 years for strategic management. So, instead of the usual 5 to 10 years which the organizations were looking at for the corporate planning process, in the present setup the organizations are looking at 3 years for a strategic management horizon. In fact, many of the IT companies look at even a smaller horizon. They look at a horizon of just 1 year. So, you might have listened to many of the IT companies, the leaders of the IT companies, when they present their annual reports, when they present the reports of the performance of their companies, making a mention, our guidance suggests. So, this is in fact one of the first terms to be coined by one of the leading IT companies, that is Infosys. It coined this term, our guidance suggests. What does this guidance suggest? So, the guidance, in essence, the company was looking at a shorter time horizon and was saying that the next quarter we may be like this, and the next quarter we are likely to revise our values or the forecast to this level. So, this is how the whole industry of IT and electronics, they have changed the domain of corporate planning, brought in this strategic management, and strategic management which has been brought in almost holds sway as of now. So, with this, what does this term strategic management mean or the strategic planning mean? I give you this what do you call the formal definition of strategic planning. Strategic planning or the long range planning in an organization refers to management processes in organizations through which the future impact of change is determined and current decisions to reach a desired future are made. Then what does it include? It includes the entire process of major outside interest groups and their stakes, the expectations of dominant inside stockholders, the information present, past, present, and the production performance, the evaluation of the company's strengths and weaknesses, the formulation of organizational purpose, mission, objectives, policies and strategies. Now, in other words, in this process of strategic planning in fact encompasses the entire gamut of all the relevant stakeholders. It can be both inside the organization as well as outside the organization. Now, the question that comes is, why are these decisions on strategic planning considered long term decisions? You may just wonder, why are they being called long term decisions? Because these are going to impact the organization for a considerable future time. So, suppose a wrong decision, maybe whether it is investment or whether it is coming out with a new product or tapping a new market, is wrongly made, the organization will have to pay dearly for that. So, in other words, a strategic management decision is crucial to an organization. What does that really mean? It really means that when an organization takes a strategic management decision, it has to keep on reviewing and reviewing before it says, this is the decision which I am going to take. So, in other words, it goes back and does lot of iterations before saying that yes, this is the decision that we are going to have for the strategy for this next quarter. So, which the IT companies, our IT companies have become very adept in doing, and they have been able to demonstrate to the world again and again why they are able to make very good performance yardsticks. This has been possible because of the wonderful strategies that they have been able to put in place every quarter. Okay. Now, suppose we look at this term strategic planning and we want to explain this term strategic planning with respect to an organization. Let us look at a simple organization. Let us say we look at a simple organization, say basic chemicals and pharmaceuticals. You may just ask, what do you understand by the term objective with respect to this organization? So, the objectives can be looked at from different angles, that is the different yardsticks. One of the yardsticks on which you can look at the objective could be the return on investment. You may say the return on investment, that is, if I put 100 rupees, I should be able to get 10 rupees back on that 100 rupees. My threshold is 10%, but the goal which I want to achieve is 15%. Similarly, with respect to the sales growth rate, the organization might say the threshold is 5%, but the goal they want to achieve is 10%. Now, with respect to this basic chemicals and pharmaceutical industry, how can you draw the courses of action? That is, how can you draw this strategy? This can be drawn taking these 4 vector spaces. What are these vector spaces? The vector spaces are: 1, the product market scope. With respect to this product market scope, the industry that is being addressed is the basic chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Then the second vector could be the growth vector. The growth vector refers to product development and concentric diversification. We will come to what is concentric diversification when we go along. The third vector is the competitive advantage. Here we address the issues of patent protection and the superior research competence. Then the fourth vector is synergy, that is the use of the firm's research capabilities. So, in other words, a basic pharmaceutical, chemicals and pharmaceutical industry, it has to be very strong in research. These are brought out in these 4 vector spaces, and these 4 vector spaces are crucial for determining the strategy of the organization. Now, if you look at the way we look at purpose and mission for an organization, so many times you wonder, what does purpose mean? What does mission mean? As a student, you have to appreciate many times these terms purpose and mission are used interchangeably, that is one for the other. So, if you look at the first public sector which was started in the country back in 1948, that is the Indian telephone industry. What was the purpose for starting Indian telephone industries? The purpose for starting Indian telephone industries was basically to fulfill or the demand, the telecommunication demand of the country. So, in other words, the telecommunication demand of the country was sought to be fulfilled through the products of ITI. Now, where do we, suppose we look in the present day context, what does a mission statement really mean? A mission statement, which is a strategically revealing mission statement, it incorporates 3 elements. What are the 3 elements? One is what customer need is being satisfied, who is being satisfied, how value is created and delivered to customers satisfying their needs. I repeat, what customer need is being satisfied, who is being satisfied, how value is created and delivered to customers satisfying their needs. I take the example of an organization, that is the Saturn Corporation. This Saturn Corporation is associated with General Motors. How does the mission statement of Saturn Corporation read? The mission statement of Saturn Corporation reads like this: market vehicles developed and manufactured in the United States that are world leaders in quality, cost and customer satisfaction through the integration of people, technology and business systems, and to transfer knowledge, technology and experience throughout General Motors. So, in other words, a statement which is more or less addressing all the three elements which constitute a strategically revealing mission statement. Now, from this mission statement, we move on to what is called a business mission. What is a business mission? An organization's business mission complements its business definition. It reflects what is the vision of the management with respect to what it seeks to do. That is, it reflects the management's vision of what the organization seeks to do. In some cases, they may be general statements, but in others they may be very specific. But if you have a clearly stated mission statement, it adds focus to the organization's efforts. I give for you another example. The example that I have taken is the Hallmark Company. The Hallmark Company, as you know, is well known for its greeting cards. Now, what is the needs and the wants do they fulfill? So, you look at with respect to the generic versus the product markets, and what is the search for growth opportunities. Then you look at the greeting cards versus the personal expression market. What does all this mean? You may just say a greeting card is for an occasion, but how did this company Hallmark capture this greeting card market? It used the greeting card with a personal touch, be it a birthday, be it a wedding anniversary, or be it some other occasion. You had a personal touch attached to this greeting card. So, the result is this Hallmark Company, whenever this was put, the customer immediately identified it with the greeting card market. So, this is what a good business mission can do for a company. Now, we move to the next part, that is, how do we go from a mission statement to strategic vision? A mission statement to strategic vision, these are the questions that must be answered. That is, what changes are occurring in markets and what are the implications for the directions we need to move? What new or different customer needs should we move and satisfy? What new or different buyer segments should we concentrate on? What new geographic or product markets should we be pursuing? What should the company's business makeup look like in the next 5 years? And what is the kind of company should we be trying to become? In other words, we are looking at a time horizon, as you could see. So, in the first question, we are looking at the changes occurring in the markets. We are looking at the implications for the directions we need to move, that is, the company needs to move. In the second question, we are trying to find out what are the new or the different customers' needs which should we move to satisfy, and like that we address the different 6 questions that are there. So, the 6 questions that are addressed help an organization to formulate its strategic vision. So, we move from the mission statement to strategic vision. So, just look at how we have moved. We have looked at, when we looked at the organization, we looked at long range planning. First, the long range planning, when the time horizons started shrinking, we came down to strategic management, largely due to the type of liberalization processes and the IT revolution that has set in the country. So, you are looking at a time horizon of 3 years or even less for formulating a strategic planning. And now, when you are looking at that strategic planning, what we have seen is how do you really look at the courses of action for an organization for strategy. We took the example of a basic chemicals and pharmaceuticals company. Then we said, how do you really formulate a mission statement? Then how does this mission statement help you to draw a business mission? And now we are looking at how does a mission statement help you to draw strategic vision. Okay. Now, when we look at all this, we move to the next part of the question that we address, that is, what does the goals of an organization do? Goals of an organization legitimize organization. That is, what do you mean by legitimizing an organization? It gives it a legal entity, it makes it a legal entity. So, it identifies the inter-organizational relationships. They have good public relations value. Suppose you have defined the goals in a clear manner, this will bring out a good public relations value. It will help in image building with suppliers, customers, public policy makers and the government. It helps in coordination of multiplicity of tasks, managing of conflicts, standards of performance. In short, the goals help to act as motivators for the organization. So, in other words, goals help the employees to be motivated. Now, the goals can be looked at from 3 different viewpoints. What do we mean by understanding, or what do we mean by stating different viewpoints? One is what is called the official goal. The official goal is the one which is described in the MOA. What is the MOA? The MOA stands for the Memorandum of Association or the Charter or the Annual Report. This is the official goal. The second one is what is called the operative goal, that is, what organization is really attempting to do. How do we get to know this? This can be inferred from organizational policies. What does it do? It helps focus attention, it reduces uncertainties, it helps you to choose from organizational design alternatives. These are many times the OB experts call them as OD interventions in an organization. Suppose you have to make different OD interventions in an organization. Which is the type of intervention which is best suited to achieve the operative goal? So, this could be decided by that. Now, what is the third goal? The third goal is what is called the operational goal. The operational goal is the one which is used by supervisory personnel or managers to influence the behavior of subordinates and measure their performance. In other words, it is fairly quantified. So, the organizational goals are fairly quantified. So, what does the official goals do for an organization, or what does it convey for the outside world? Many times the official goals may be abstract, may be idealistic. Then what about the operative goals? The operative goals are the actual goals in an organization. So, there is a difference between the official goals and the operative goals. The operative goals are the ones which are the actual goals, but these are not articulated. But what about the operational goals? These are detailed goals and these are measurables. These are measurables in an organization. You can measure the operational performance in an organization. You can set up quantified yardsticks for measurement of performance in an organization. For those of you who are interested more into how to set these goals in an organization and what are all the things which should be going into policies for the organization, I refer you to this wonderful book, the book on which I just give you here, that is the Top Management Planning by George Steiner. So, this pyramid which I am presenting to you here, that is the pyramid of business policies, in fact is taken from his book, where he looks at the policies in these areas, the major policy areas, that is the line of business or the code of ethics, the secondary policies with respect to geographical area, then the major costs, the products, then the functional policies with respect to marketing, production, etc. Then the procedures and standard operating plans with respect to customer orders, servicing. Then the rules, that is the delay of payment of checks, security, etc. All these come under different policy pyramids. So, this is how the pyramid goes with respect to an organization. Now, with respect to an organization, we can look at strategies in different ways. I present to you one or two such strategies which can be useful to an organization and which are grouped under different headings. Now, the first one which I am going to present to you is what is called a growth strategies. That is, an organization can look at growth strategies as an option. What could be the examples of growth strategies? I give here 6 such examples. The first one, hold relative position in high growth product stroke market area. What do you mean by this? Suppose you are already a market leader in a particular segment, what will be the aim of that organization in that particular market segment? The aim of that organization in that particular market segment will be to hold on to its leadership position. So, you can name number of such organizations. Take for example, the Hindustan Lever. Hindustan Lever is a leader in the detergent market. So, many of the products brought out by Hindustan Lever in the detergent market, starting from Surf now to the one which is going like the Surf Matic, have made their own distinctive mark in the market segments to which they are addressing. Now, what is the aim of Hindustan Lever? The aim of Hindustan Lever is to hold on to this leadership position in this market segment, that is not allow its number 1 slot to be threatened. though this number 1 slot is thought to be threatened by number of other players. The other growth strategy the company think of is increase market share in high growth market. So, these are some of the strategies which the IT companies try to follow. So, you have a high growth market, and in this high growth market each player wants to increase its market share. The third growth strategy a company can think of is increase market share in mature markets. What do you mean by saying mature markets? In mature markets, the characteristic is the demand has almost got saturated. What do you mean by saying the demand has almost got saturated? It is almost fulfilled. Now, when the demand is almost fulfilled, what does it mean? The number of players who are there in mature markets are more. So, they are vying for a space in the market share. So, if you are a leader in the marketplace, so what would the company like to do in such a mature market? It would like to use its leadership position to increase its market share. The same example of Hindustan Lever can be quoted. Or the other example you can think of is the Colgate, which holds a leadership position in the dental market, okay, that is a toothpaste market. The fourth example that you can, which I am going to give you for the growth strategy is hold strong relative position in mature market, use excess cash flow funds to effect penetration with existing product line, that is the multinational market. What does it mean? It means that you try to explore newer markets, even if it means you are looking at international horizons. Do not confine yourself to domestic horizon, look at the international horizon also. So, this is what many of our Indian companies, especially the IT companies, are now trying to do. If you see, many of the leading IT companies looking at expanding their international market horizons. So, you had the Infosys focusing very heavily on the American market, that is the US market. Now, you have Infosys trying to come into the European market and trying to be a leading player in the European market as well. The same is the strategy that is being followed by Wipro. What could be the fifth growth strategy? The fifth growth strategy which I am going to give you is the same as in 4, but come out with new products, markets domestically. Suppose you find that there is a domestic market which is untapped, and that domestic market wants new products, and which the company can fulfill reasonably, then the company should go in for that. So, a very good example could be the telecom companies, which were coming out with earlier with different types of handsets. Now, the consumer wants slim handsets, that is, he does not want a big type of a telephone, he wants a smaller type of telephone. So, in other words, the consumer tastes and preferences are undergoing change. When the consumer tastes and preferences are undergoing change, the telecom companies, the production facilities in the telecom companies can be suitably altered or changed or made to satisfy these particular market changes which are emanating, maybe due to large number of players or maybe due to liberalization, whatever it may be. Then the sixth example of growth strategy which I am going to give you or which I am stating here is hold strong relative position in diversified product line domestically and use cash flow, funds, capability and other resources to diversify markets. What does that mean? It essentially means that the companies should not just depend on the markets which they are satisfying in the present scenario. That is, suppose you are trying to fulfill the needs of a particular market segment. You should not be confining yourself to that market segment for a long time. You should try to diversify markets. What do we mean by this? These are some things which we will explain when we go along. These are things which we call or which we refer to as product market development matrix, which we will take up when we go along. This is the growth strategies which we discussed. So, what we have discussed here is I have given you 6 different examples of growth strategies which a company can follow. We will discuss the dependency reduction strategies when we go along in the next class. So, for this class we stop here for this session and we come back to discuss this dependency reduction strategies in the next session. Thank you.